Welcome, friends, residents, and neighbors to another edition of Chicago Corner. I'm your host, Jerry Vasilatos, where we cover the people, news, events, and culture that make Chicago the best city in the U.S. Joining me this evening, I have Green Party candidate Mark Buettner, who is running for the 6-year term of the Metropolitan Water Reclamation District
of Greater Chicago.
It's a mouthful.
Yeah.
But we're going to be talking tonight about Mark's candidacy along with Green Party policies as they would like to see the what's the acronym now?
MWRD GC.
All right.
They lengthened it about 4 years ago.
I'll take your word for it.
Okay.
As we talk about Green Party initiatives to improve the management of the water throughout Chicago for our safety, for our drinking. And we're going to get into what the Water Reclamation District is all about also. But I want to share a little bit up front here about our guest, Mark. Maybe we can even bring up the website for the Illinois Green Party. There you go. Mark received a degree in water technology from New Mexico State University in 2008. He worked as an Illinois wastewater treatment works operator, Class 1, for 14 years in the water reclamation industry, 9 of those years as an MWRD treatment plant operator. Mark grew up in Mark Prospect, but has been living happily for the last 10 years in Des Plaines, 2 blocks from the river. Mark wants to improve stormwater management and reduce nutrient pollution in our waterways. He would like Illinoisans to be able to swim in our rivers, and he is determined to make sure our tax money is well spent. So that's quite a history there, working for 14 years in the water reclamation industry.
One job I had for 2 years was I was grease police.
What does that mean?
So industrial waste inspectors, which they call them with the MWRD, is you go around to every restaurant and every food manufacturing place and beer manufacturing place and then industrial sites, and you see if they have containment of their solvents, if they have a grease trap outside, because every time you wash dishes, there's grease that goes in. It's caught in this grease trap, and then the grease trap gets vacuumed out about once a month. If they don't do that, it flows off and flows into the wastewater system.
Okay.
And then is kind of a problem once it gets to the wastewater treatment facility.
This is a very important, I would call it utility and service, that not only people in Chicago rely on, but all across Illinois. Can you tell us more about the specifics of what the responsibilities of the MWRD, if I'm getting the acronym right now?
That's good.
are?
The responsibility is it's actually a federal law. 40 CFR. The wastewater district takes in all the waste from all the municipal and houses and industrial, and a great deal of the stormwater.
Sewage as well?
Yes.
Okay.
Sewage and stormwater that goes off the streets, goes off your houses, goes off everywhere. And it goes to a facility and it's treated to a certain standard through a bunch of biological processes, some chemical settling out treatments sometimes, pumped. There's a lot of rakes. There's a lot of things that pull out all this plastics and that kind of things. There's a lot that goes down the sewer that you can't imagine. There's a lot of grit, which comes out in a separate process. And then it goes through a biological process through a bunch of aeration tanks. The bacteria take care. There's a giant population of bacteria. The bacteria eat all the available solids that come through, soluble carbon and a lot of other things. And then the bacteria become older and then eat each other. And so they reduce the amount that comes in by probably 30% just from the bacteria. It goes to a settling tank. The end product from the bacterial treatment settles out. It goes to the bottom of the settling tank. A certain percentage of it is recycled back to our bacterial friends because they're older bacteria. And then another percentage of it goes as waste, which is then goes through a process of flinging the water out and then pressing it out, and then it becomes sludge, and then the sludge is dried and then turned and dried, and it has to come to another pretty specific standard to become a biosolid. And then that biosolid is put on train cars and goes a lot to the farms south of here. We own our own train line too. So that's a real rough explanation of what happens.
So tell our audience why, what are some of the responsibilities of the board of which you're running for the 6-year term? So what do you see as the important decisions that the board is responsible for? I mean, I'm sure there are a lot, but I mean, if you can kind of give us, an overview of why it's important to have board members there that know what they're doing to protect the safety of the clean water and disposal of the, bad water, the polluted water.
Responsibilities of the board are mostly kind of a contract approval type of thing, and looking at a lot of contracts, and it's $2 billion a year, I think, is our budget. And so there are thousands of contracts that go out to contractors to replace pumps, to replace bar racks, all parts and all the processes. And the idea is that they should have an idea of, is the bid open to a lot of contractors? Are the contractors approved? Are the contractors union contractors? Are they going to be able to get it done on time? Do they have the ability to get up and go in the machinery? And actually, the end of this, the end of the whole process is after you go through the whole process of the settling and the getting the solids out, it goes out the end and goes to some sort of sanitation. Chlorine knocks out the couple of different disease organisms that'll make it through. Cholera will make it through. There's a couple of diseases that will make it through. So the chlorine kills them, is mixed in at the end, and then a dechlorination chemical is mixed in to take the chlorine out. And then it goes up and out and into a receiving stream, to the receiving stream, to the Des Plaines River, where I live, and then to the Mississippi.
So you're essentially tasked with responsibly managing the resources that are directed towards the right vendors and contractors to get the job done properly.
Yes.
Okay.
And actually, our key task is to keep whatever water we put out that we finish processing to a standard so that it's clean, because somewhere that water is going to go down the line and become someone else's drinking water. Or it's going to go to the Gulf of Mexico, and the Gulf of Mexico has a dead zone and has a problem with that. And I was reading an article, manatee grass was dying from eutrophication, which was too much algae and it was clogging it. And they had tracked down the source of phosphorus and nitrogen to 30% of the wastewater plant that was on the shore that was discharging into that area. And it's not that they weren't able to clean it up. They just were not technically able to take that phosphorus and that nitrogen out. So it was still going out.
So as I understand it, lead in our water is not under the purview of what the MWRD is tasked with, although I'm curious to know, as someone who is going to be focusing on resources that are directed towards providing clean water, some of your thoughts on the situation regarding the replacement of lead pipes in the city. I don't know if that's something that falls within the range of suggestions or thoughts that you have when we're talking about clean water that you guys are also managing, or that the MWRD would be managing.
They're completely separate things. When
Right.
I was in water technology, there was a water track and there was a wastewater track. And there's two sets of licenses and it's completely different. And they're different utilities. I live in a 100-year-old house in Des Plaines. And yes, I know I have lead pipes. And actually I had the pipes replaced from the corpse stop on the street to my house. And he pulled it out and it was full of tubercules and I couldn't see through it. And yeah, it was lead. And, but the line is still going lengthwise down my street is still lead, I'm sure. I think that the lead pipes were still installed until something like 1989. And, I keep reading a lot of massive money and massive projects to kind of replace all those. And in the city, there's a lot of ideas. They're going to have to, all those trees that are on the parkway are going to have to come out because that's where that line is.
Well, there's a program as they're repairing pipes to replace them. But I guess clearly, despite the good work that the MWRD is going to be doing to ensure the clean water going out, a lot of that is unfortunately stymied by the fact that the city is not properly maintaining and replacing the pipes that are still adding the lead to the water, despite the clean water that you guys are filtering and making sure is safe and healthy for residents across the city and the state.
Yes. And there's a polyphosphate chemical they have been putting into the drinking water that attracts itself to the inside of lead pipes that kind of coats it to not let them further break down. And it works most of the time, but sometimes there's disturbance in lead pipes. Sometimes there's shifting of the ground, and sometimes that coating on the inside kind of breaks off and then the lead is exposed and things like that. There's a lot of people who have gotten their own kind of house filtering system and to try to limit the lead. And that's a whole nother idea. In fact, at Detroit, that debacle was they had changed water sources to another river, and the river, that secondary river they had changed to, had kind of a pH acid problem, and it ate off the coatings and then started to eat the lead. And then that's why all those areas got serious lead exposure. And in fact, President Joe Biden, and there's an infrastructure bill, there's a lot of money going around. I would like to say it was going to happen, but I really haven't seen a street torn up in my neighborhood.
Yeah, well, it's slow going. Let's shift gears a little bit now to the Green Party. And you're running as a candidate of the Green Party as opposed to the Republican or the Democratic Party. What were some of the initial challenges your campaign has had to face to get on the ballot due to Illinois being strict with third parties?
We had to have quite a few petition signatures, and it was difficult in January and February. Who was going to take your mitten off to sign a petition? And we kind of have a lack of funds. That's part of the Green Party. I keep reading in political people of all, these columns and all this money these people are raising and all these functions that they're charging $300 a seat to. That's not us. But the Green Party is a third party. Third parties have not quite caught on here. I always want to send somebody over to Germany and figure out how the Green Party in Germany did it, because they're all over the place. They've been elected left and right. I would like to, but the advantage, actually, somebody who ran for a candidacy before is, I live in the suburbs, which are Republican. My father was a Republican precinct captain 100 years ago, but the Republicans will vote Green Party because they're pissed off the Democrats.
It's more tribal than logical. Yeah.
So I said, well, that's a good thing. And if we can get a few Democrats, to vote Green Party too.
They've got a stranglehold in Illinois.
Yeah.
It's down to everywhere.
And
maybe not so much downstate, but.
Yeah. And they're, what can I say? They're just more organized, as far as I can say, the Democrat.
The Democrat, yeah.
And we've had discussions back and forth, and we have monthly meetings, and we have bi-weekly candidate meetings. And I don't know, I kind of bring up things, well, this guy's doing this and this guy's doing this. It's like, why can't we do this? And why didn't you tell me, to go to this function, it was going to cost $100, and to go to this endorsement, I should have made a contribution of $1,000, and, how was I going to get sponsored for that? I hope to make a instructional guide of all the little molehills that we hit along here.
Well, given that you mentioned that the Democratic Party is more organized in Illinois, why choose to run third party or green as opposed to join the party that is basically got a stranglehold over everything? I mean, I guess what is some of the thinking? You mentioned a moment ago, Republicans will vote green because they're pissed off at the Democrats, but the real reason to vote green is larger than that.
Right.
Maybe to that point, what are some of the strategies that the Green Party advocates that you see missing from those on the board that might have more Democratic leanings party-wise? If that's a way to parse it.
I think the Green Party politics, I think it'll be approached more with kind of a people type of level. It's like, okay, this neighborhood's flooding. What can we do about this neighborhood? How do we get independent contractors to get contracts? How do we ensure that the contractors are union contractors? And in fact, I talked to a friend of mine who's a machinist, and he said, I just want them to be from Illinois. He says, I don't care what they are.
So you see a lot of labor coming from outside Illinois as opposed to jobs being spread around here within Illinois?
It seems that sometimes the laborers working for the subcontractors are not of what they should be.
Okay.
And, the MWRD has millions of jobs. I mean, 1,790 or something like that is permanent employees. And there's summer jobs, there are intern jobs, there's engineering intern jobs, there's operator intern jobs. So there's a lot of jobs. And I would think the Green Party would do that, and I would think the Green Party would, when I become commissioner, let's say when, yeah. I hope I will go to all the 6 plants once a month, and I will talk to, the operating engineers, the machinists. I will look at some giant contractor and hope to talk to the guy who's in charge of that contract and say, how are things going? How far are we? What kind of problems? Let's hope that we don't have to tack another 30% on, which happens here and there. That's kind of what I'm looking at, a lot of stuff. And so it's, and I have a background. So if they're talking about something, most of the time I can kind of figure it out. And if I go to these places and I look at these contracts, these contractors or this replacement and stuff, and talk to the people, does this work? How long has this been broken? Shouldn't this have been repaired 10 years ago? Where are we now? Instead of, sometimes the district goes and goes and goes, and then it becomes a disaster. And then they have to replace everything.
How do you think your campaign will contribute to getting the Illinois Green Party to be more recognition? And what has voters' reactions been to your campaign? Because we talk a lot on Hardlands Media and Chicago Quarter, the importance of third-party candidates. And you kind of explained the reasons that you decided to choose representing the Green Party. In a larger sense, though, hopefully, attention to your campaign will also draw attention to the Green Party and the importance of third-party candidates, as we need to be looking more to them than the existing parties that seem to be running everything and not so successfully.
Yes. And I am not completely knowledgeable about this, but there are different standards applied to third-party candidates for different elections. And the hope is, because we're running, we'll stay in the lower petition signature requirement. I believe if we were not in the Green Party or we hadn't been in an election before, it wouldn't have been 1,400. It would have been 5,000 or something like that. and that's difficult to get during the winter. We hope that, that, like I said, there's a strange bunch of standards for third parties, and
but visibility is most important. I mean, you guys are getting it. It seems like.
Yeah.
And your candidacy or your run will hopefully also draw more attention to the Green Party in Illinois. I mean, I can't imagine people don't know the Green Party, but what they need to know is what alternatives and what improvements that the Green Party offers over other parties.
Yes, and I have kind of been in these meetings and stuff like this, and I would love for, for us to be at events, registering voters, Green Party registering voters at all kinds of things, at the Riot Fest, at, the Blues Festival, at all kinds of things like that. Don't just be there and make people aware. I mean, this is one of the questions I had when I started with them. I said, there was one guy, George Milkowski, who had run as a MWRD candidate for Green Party about 5 years ago. And I had seen his name, and I had seen it in a forum that was I think the Daily Herald was sponsoring it. And beyond that, I had never really had any contact. So I said, we need to get out there somehow. And I would hope also, I have like 2 pages of environmental organizations and, voter advocacy organizations. And I think we need to work a web with them too, I don't know if we need to pay for ads with them on their websites, or we need to just get an announcement occasionally with them. And I'm not sure how to do that, but I'm working on it. And I've actually talked to a couple of people, and they've, I said, I'm running. Do you want me to say something? Do you want me to do something? And they said, we don't sponsor candidates, or we don't endorse. And I said, well, you're about the river, you're about the environment. You should think twice about it.
Is there any special initiative that you want to propose to bring in with your successful candidacy? And also, as we come to the close of our show, can you share with our audience why they should pay attention to you on the ballot and vote for you? It's your pitch time.
My two biggest beefs are one is CSOs, which is combined sewer overflow. When we get a little over half of an inch of rain, it comes down too fast during the sewers. It goes to the treatment plant, and the treatment plant can't handle it and pops it into the river. Our entire sewer system is very old. There's a lot of gates. There's a lot of places where it meets. That needs an enormous amount of repair. The plants need to be expanded. There's heavier rains. There's, climate change. We need to be able to handle a heavier rain. And the tarp system and the storage system for rainwater was designed, I think, in the 80s or something like that. And there are some questions I have of it being able to handle it. But the other second big thing is the nutrient pollution. Even though we treat it and then sterilize it or sanitize it before it goes to the river, there are still a fair amount of nutrients that get through. And there are ways to control these nutrients within the system, different ways. There are different, I went to a wastewater system in Kishwaukee, and they had a beautiful system that did everything. There was also, the Kishwaukee also was running power off the methane, off their digesters. And they were generating gas, and they were running a bunch of turbines with it. And they were generating their own power, and they were actually generating so much power, they were putting some on the power grid back to ComEd. And they also had electrical chargers in their parking lot for like EV vehicles. The EV vehicles is also a concern. And in fact, I just saw that California is going to require landscapers by 2025 to have all EV machinery and lawnmowers and things like that. That's another thing we need to get on.
I would also venture to say, given your 14 years of experience inside the system, you've seen the areas where improvement is needed.
Yes.
To bring to your fellow board members, because how many members are on the board? I think it's 8, 9, 8,
yeah.
9. Okay, so with a successful run in candidacy, you can take your experience to maybe point them in directions they weren't aware of that they should be aware of, to put these strategies into place.
Yes, I am probably the person that could ask, the right question.
Point them in the right directions.
I am the guy in the room that's going to ask a question. And in fact, when I used to go to all the technical sessions, I would be sitting in the front 2 rows, and somebody would go through their lecture, and I would say, "Okay, wait a minute. It's like, hey, your budget for labor there is a little low. Where did you get that number?"
Mark, thank you so much for joining us today. I hope that this gave our audience a good overview of why they need to pay attention to that particular election, pay more attention to the Green Party. To our viewers out there, thanks again for joining us for another edition of Chicago Corner, and join us again next week, where we will continue to cover the people, stories, and culture that make Chicago the best city in the country. And remember, if it's happening on the streets, you'll hear about it here on Chicago Corner. Watch for us on YouTube also. Join us next week, and thanks again for watching.
The views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the speakers and do not necessarily reflect the views or positions of any entities they represent. If you would like to be a guest on Chicago Corner, please email our host, Jerry, at chicagocorner.tv.